long before the Mystery Shack stood as a roadside attraction in the Pacific Northwest, long before the Pines twins stumbled across the strange wonders of Gravity Falls, and even before the journals were written, the town itself was already hiding secrets. Secrets that not even time could erase. Some say the weirdness started when the first settlers arrived. Others believe it was always there, older than trees, older than the stars in the sky. A place where the laws of reality stretched like taffy and where mystery is not a visitor, but a permanent residence. To understand Gravity Falls, we have to begin not with the Pines family or even with Journal 3, but with the land itself. Gravity Falls sits nestled between dense coniferous forests, hidden mountains, and cold rivers that seem to wind in impossible directions. The land is alive in ways people don't see. Animals behave oddly. Plants sometimes grow with strange properties. And then there's the gravity, always just slightly off. Leaves swirl in strange patterns. Water doesn't always flow downhill. Compasses spin. Maps of the region never stay accurate for long. There's a reason nobody can quite remember how long Gravity Falls has existed. Official records are full of contradictions. One local legend speaks of an indigenous tribe who called the area Salwana, or the place that watches. According to oral tradition, their shamans believed the land itself had consciousness, not malevolent, not kind, just aware. Sacred stones were placed around the forest to appease the sleeping watcher. None of those stones had been recovered, and the tribe mysteriously vanished several generations before European contact. When the first settlers arrived in the early 1800s, they were lured by stories of gold and fertile hunting grounds. A man named Obadiah Jenkins led the expedition. He wrote in his journal that the forest sings at night, and that the stars over Gravity Falls don't behave like stars should. Within months, only a handful of the original settlers remained. The rest were either driven mad or simply disappeared into the trees. Jenkins himself vanished one winter's night, after claiming he had seen a floating triangle with one eye. His cabin was found intact, warm fire still burning, stew still simmering, but no sign of the man was ever seen again. Throughout the 19th century, explorers, gold diggers, and researchers kept trying to chart the region. All failed. The mountains seemed to shift. Rivers forked and merged in nonsensical ways. One government-funded expedition in 1876 went missing for 5 years. When the team reemerged, they claimed they had only been gone for a week. Most of them were too mentally broken to speak, but one left behind sketches, wild and frenzied drawings of geometrical beasts, glowing trees, and underground doorways. Gravity Falls eventually became a quiet town, not by design, but because no one else wanted to live there. The U.S. government, by that time, had already marked it as a geologically unstable region and restricted aerial mapping. Strangely, no satellites have ever gotten a clear shot of Gravity Falls. Something about the energy field in the area creates interference. It's as if the town refuses to be seen. And yet, life in Gravity Falls carried on. People built homes. Children were born. Shops opened. But those who lived there long enough knew that weirdness was simply part of life. Things went missing for days and reappeared in different colors. Neighbors aged at different rates. Street lamps occasionally hummed in Morse code. Dreams bled into waking life. People stopped asking questions and learned to live with the unexplainable, like fog that whispered names, or a forest path that always led you back to your starting point no matter how far you walked. But every few decades, something bigger happened. An event the townspeople called the thinning. During the thinning, the boundaries between worlds would weaken. Shadows grew longer. Time bent. People would experience moments from the past or find doors where there were none before. The last known thinning was in the 1960s, during which multiple townspeople reported seeing the same red comet blaze across the sky on different nights. Those who lived through it spoke little about it afterward. Many moved away. Some joined a cult that worshipped a being they called the Watcher of Angles. There's also the question of the hidden tunnels beneath Gravity Falls. A local conspiracy theorist once claimed that an entire underground network existed older than the town itself. Some entrances, he said, could only be found when the stars aligned on the solstice. These tunnels allegedly connected ley lines and magical sites from different ages. He went missing shortly after making these claims public. His house was burned down in a freak lightning strike, though there was no storm reported that day. One of the most fascinating aspects of early Gravity Falls is the frequency with which certain symbols appear throughout history. Triangles with eyes, six-fingered hands, spiral constellations that don't match any known stars. These markings show up on ancient trees, cave walls, and abandoned cabins. Some believe they are warnings, others think they are invitations. And then there's the music. Some residents have reported hearing distant, melodic tunes in the woods, like old-fashioned music box melodies or slow, echoing whistling. These tunes only come at night, and seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Those who follow the music either come back changed or don't come back at all. Despite all of this, Gravity Falls isn't a place of horror. It's not evil. It simply is a convergence point. A strange, forgotten crack in the surface of reality, like a dream you're not sure you actually had. Even in modern times, these phenomena persist. Local teens speak of the ghost of the radio tower, a flickering figure seen only between stations. Children draw symbols they've never been taught. GPS devices fail. Travelers find the town by accident, and often don't remember how they got there. The oldest tree in Gravity Falls, called the Whispering Cedar, is said to be over 700 years old. People who press their ear to the bark report hearing different things. Some hear laughter, others crying. A few claim they hear themselves, but from the future. Why has no one exposed these mysteries to the world? Perhaps because Gravity Falls doesn't want to be known. It hides in plain sight, cloaked in absurdity and denial. Those who come looking for answers are often distracted by the obvious oddities: a wax museum, a weird attraction, a talking duck. But the real answers lie in the quiet corners, the untouched groves, the dreams that repeat over generations, the journals that whisper truths you're not ready to hear. If you've ever wondered why things feel off in Gravity Falls, it's not your imagination. The town is old, not just in years, but in something deeper, something ancient. It remembers things long forgotten, and if you stay long enough, really stay, you might start remembering them too. Because in Gravity Falls, nothing stays buried forever. The forest of Gravity Falls holds more than just wildlife and hiking trails. Beneath its soil lie fossils that don't match any known species, and deep underground caverns hum with a frequency only heard by a few rare ears, or perhaps by minds more open than others. Local legend speaks of the Forest Heart, a massive crystal formation hidden somewhere in the woods, pulsing faintly with energy. Some believe it is the source of Gravity Falls anomalies, a natural amplifier of cosmic weirdness. Others say it's not natural at all that it was placed there. Who or what placed it there remains a mystery. There are also reports scattered across old letters, sheriff's logs, and forgotten museum archives of strange lights in the sky long before the modern age. One particularly chilling account, dated 1883, tells of an entire cabin disappearing overnight, leaving only a scorched ring and a smell of metal and ozone in the air. The settler who reported the incident was found days later, muttering nonsense and drawing concentric eyes on the trees. He spoke of a triangle-shaped watcher that came through the sky. No one believed him, except one, a cartographer named Jeremiah Pines. While no record directly links him to the modern Pines family, his name pops up in local registries and cryptic diary entries, suggesting he may have been an early explorer of the Gravity Falls region. Some of his old maps, preserved in the Gravity Falls Historical Society, though barely acknowledged, contain bizarre annotations. Do not camp near this glade. Avoid during solstice. Or most cryptically, it hears what the trees cannot say. It's not just the land that remembers. The creatures do too. Every so often, a rare beast is glimpsed in the distance, not just the playful gnomes or the mischievous gremloblins, but things older, beings whose forms seem blurred at the edges as though reality struggles to render them. They appear in cave paintings, etched with pigments not known to this region. Sometimes they're seen on stormy nights just beyond the tree line. A deer with too many eyes, a humanoid figure made entirely of moss and stone, a bird that sings backwards. These sightings always coincide with fluctuations in magnetic fields, power outages, and most tellingly dreams. Those who witness these beings often speak of strange visions in the nights that follow, dreams of towering machines beneath the earth, of whispers coming through the static of radios, of eyes watching from within reflections, as if the town itself was dreaming and pulling people into that dream. This leads us to the notion of the veil, an idea that appears in both Tremblay's lost letters and in the first pages of Ford Pine's Journal 1. The veil is described as an invisible curtain between the known world and the one just beyond a place where physics loosen, where memories become unstable, where identity flickers. Gravity Falls, it is said, exists right on the edge of this veil, a tear in reality, a place where the rules of existence don't quite hold. Perhaps this is why people forget. For all the strange history of Gravity Falls, the townsfolk remain oddly unaware. Denial is powerful, but this is something more. Over the decades, researchers, journalists, and even a few paranormal investigators have noted a peculiar amnesia in the population. People forget sightings. Events disappear from memory, not just individually, but collectively. Entire chunks of history wiped clean. Could it be the town itself wants to be forgotten? One fringe theory, found only in coded letters within Journal 2, suggests that Gravity Falls is not a location, but a being, that it is alive in some sense, conscious or perhaps semi-sentient. It protects itself by erasing memories, by warping logic, by burying its own history. Ford Pines later dismissed the idea as emotional overinterpretation, but even he left a note in the margin. Then again, the dreams did begin after I moved here. And then, of course, there's the glyphs. Scattered across rocks, barn doors, and tree trunks are symbols no one can quite translate. Triangles, spirals, eyes, and interlocking shapes. Some only appear during certain celestial alignments. Some glow under ultraviolet light. One tree, dubbed the Memory Tree by Dipper, was found with dozens of glyphs spiraling up its trunk. When mapped out, they formed a shape eerily similar to a brain. Are they warnings, messages, rituals? Or more hauntingly, memories? The notion that Gravity Falls is absorbing, preserving, or even feeding off memory is not new among the more fringe researchers. One old town myth, the Watchers in the Leaves, tells of forest spirits who steal the names of children who venture too far into the woods. The story is told as a cautionary tale, but in some cases, it has bizarre echoes in police reports. Children found wandering with no idea where they were. Adults forgetting their own addresses. Pets returning after weeks with unfamiliar behavior. Gravity Falls doesn't just attract the strange, it seems to generate it. And if so, we must ask, what happens when the town is remembered? In one entry from Journal 1, Ford wrote, "The more I remember this place, the more it remembers me. As if by observing it too closely, I awaken something beneath the roots. Perhaps we all do. Perhaps memory is the key, or the lock." This concept of memory as a trigger, a currency, or even a threat is deeply woven into the town's mythology. And it may explain why so few people speak of Gravity Falls after leaving. The brain simply can't hold on to what it's not meant to know. Or worse, something won't let it. So what do we make of this? A quiet town nestled in the Oregon woods, populated by people who smile a little too easily and forget a little too quickly. A place of anomalies, riddles, and ancient echoes. Is it cursed, alive, protected? Or perhaps simply a place where reality is thinner and something else leaks through? Dipper Pines once asked in his journal, "Is Gravity Falls weird because weird things come here, or do weird things come here because it's Gravity Falls?" The truth, as always, may never be known fully. But one thing is certain. Gravity Falls is more than just a town. It is a threshold, a whisper, a scar in the fabric of the world that refuses to heal. For decades, Quentin Trembley's name had been scrubbed from textbooks, laughed off by historians, and relegated to the obscure corners of bizarre presidential trivia. Yet what if the truth was far more complex? What if the madness he was mocked for was just the surface layer of a mind that saw too much? After being declared unfit for office by the more sensible factions of the government, Trembley wasn't jailed nor executed nor forgotten in the traditional sense. Instead, he chose exile, voluntarily encasing himself in a giant block of peanut brittle, deep within a forgotten cavern, guarded by nothing but his own unpredictability and a series of booby traps made entirely out of cheese-based mechanisms. An absurd detail, yes. But that's the nature of Trembley's story. Every joke hides a truth, and every truth sounds like a joke. His peanut brittle tomb remained undisturbed for nearly 150 years until it was discovered by accident. Of course, by Dipper and Mabel Pines. But was it an accident? Or, as some fans and theorists believe, was the discovery engineered? Trembley, after all, was a man obsessed with time, fate, and cycles of history. His farewell notes included references to the children of twins and a shack of mysteries. He spoke of the ink-stained map and the boy with the journal. He wrote of an age that would come again, the age of Cipher. When Dipper cracked open that sarcophagus of sweets, he didn't just awaken a forgotten man, he reignited an ancient flame. Trembley's return to consciousness, still in full presidential regalia, mind you, brought with it new questions. Why had this man been so obsessed with sealing himself away? What did he fear? Or perhaps, what did he protect? The Cipher conspiracy, Trembley's greatest fear. Among Trembley's less publicized belongings was a stack of torn, frayed papers hidden within a hollowed-out turkey leg. Yes, really. Which contained early warnings of an all-seeing triangle who spoke without lips and burned without flame. He warned of the great unraveling, the crumbling of wall, and a being that feeds on doubt, deals in riddles, and dances in the minds of men. These notes eerily mirror descriptions of Bill Cipher, written more than a century before Ford Pines ever documented him in Journal 1. Some believe Tremblay encountered Bill during his youth, perhaps during his expedition across the uncharted forests of the Pacific Northwest. One diary entry, dated 1832, describes a dream where he woke with one eye glowing, saw the stars spin backward, and heard laughter that echoed like broken glass. Upon waking, he reportedly carved the Eye of Providence into a tree and wept for 3 straight days. If true, this encounter may have been the very thing that spurred his descent into madness. Not the result of delusion, but of contact with a force so beyond human comprehension that it shattered his grip on conventional logic. Tremblay may have spent the rest of his life trying to outsmart Bill Cipher, hiding truths in absurdities, wrapping warnings in satire. They unite the states by tying them together with licorice idea, long thought to be a sign of insanity, may have had a hidden meaning. In cryptography circles, licorice was once slang for encrypted code during the Civil War era. Tying them together could have referred to uniting scattered clues. Even his nonsensical laws like deer may not wear top hats might have been symbolic. In Gravity Falls, deer are frequently associated with the forest watchers' neutral but ancient observers. Denying them hats may be a metaphor for preventing them from assuming human intellect or blending into human society, again seemingly absurd on the surface, deeply allegorical beneath. The secret meeting beneath the Capitol. One of the most elusive legends surrounding Tremblay's presidency is the so-called secret meeting of 1837, held beneath the Capitol building in a candlelit vault known only as Room D. According to rare whispers and blacked-out documents found in the archives of the National Archives and humorously misfiled under historical fiction treasonous, Tremblay met with a faction of scientists, mystics, and war veterans who had all encountered anomalous events they couldn't explain, things that defied reality. This coalition called themselves the Unknown Order. They presented Tremblay with an ultimatum: abandon his research or risk the balance of the known world. He, in response, declared them spoil sports and established an underground facility codenamed Cavern Alpha 13, said to be hidden within the subterranean cave systems beneath Oregon. Its purpose? To store, study, and eventually destroy any object linked to Cipher's influence. Whether Cavern Alpha 13 truly exists is debated, but its rumored inventory includes an hourglass that reverses time by exactly 13 seconds, but only during eclipses. A perfectly preserved top hat soaked in ash allegedly burned in a mind fire. A set of playing cards that reshuffle themselves every midnight into ominous messages. A mirror that shows your reflection one day in the future, but only if you whisper a lie into it. And at the center, an obsidian triangle, mounted upside down, with one corner broken off and wrapped in gold wire, labeled only property if Cipher do not awaken. Exile by design, the final days of Tremblay's rule. When Tremblay vanished from public life, most believed he'd lost his grip entirely feeding squirrels with congressional seals and trying to impeach the moon. But there's a more intriguing theory that Tremblay wanted to be removed from power, believing that leadership came with too much visibility, too much vulnerability to Bill Cipher's influence. In one final unsigned letter, found hidden in the lining of his sock naturally, he writes, "They say I'm mad, but better mad than ensnared. He sees order and hates it. He feeds on control and chaos alike. Hide what you must, laugh loudly, love licorice, and never, never trust a triangle." It's worth noting that this letter predates the public discovery of cipher symbols by over a century. He spent his final known years traversing the western frontier, often disguised as a traveling magician, occasionally appearing in towns days before they experienced strange anomalies, as if he was following the ripple effects of Cipher's interference. He carried with him a suitcase labeled "Truths Too Early," and once reportedly told a barmaid that he was waiting for the stars to blink in reverse. His final disappearance came in 1861. Some say he died alone in the woods. Others claim he found a way to unbecome, removing himself from the timeline entirely to protect it. And there are whispers that he's still out there, watching, waiting, eating peanut brittle in dimensions yet unnamed, a legacy reclaimed. When Quentin Tremblay was rediscovered and unfrozen by the Pines twins, it wasn't just a comical interlude in their summer. It was the resurfacing of a figure whose knowledge, though deeply encrypted in nonsense, may hold vital clues to understanding the fabric of Gravity Falls. He might be gone again, drifting through the vastness of forgotten history. But his influence, his warnings, his riddles, his chaotic foresight remain etched into the very landscape of Gravity Falls. Look close enough at a tree stump near the Mystery Shack, and you'll see his signature. Turn a page of Journal 3 just right under moonlight, and you might spot a doodle of a turkey wearing bifocals, his final symbol of resistance. Because in a town ruled by secrets, sometimes the only way to hide the truth is to scream it through a megaphone of absurdity. As we close the book on Quentin Tremblay, or rather, pry it open and discover yet another hidden flap full of peanut brittle and secret codes, it becomes clear that his story is far more than a footnote in the margins of America's past. Tremblay isn't just a punchline, a caricature of a forgotten politician with a squirrel for a vice president. He's a relic, a vessel, a man who quite possibly saw too much of the truth and wrapped it in layers of comedy so it could survive the centuries. In fact, many of the insane laws and practices attributed to Tremblay have a strange pattern when examined closely. They seem designed not for governance, but for concealment, like encryption keys buried in legalese. For example, all documents must be signed upside down. At face value, nonsense, but consider this. Gravity-based ink, ciphered languages where orientation changes the message, or even mirror writing that requires an upside-down angle to reveal hidden messages. Perhaps this wasn't madness. It was a security system. Newspapers must be soaked in vinegar before reading. Vinegar reveals certain types of invisible ink. Coincidence? Or another deliberate safeguard? Every citizen must own a hat with a false compartment. A strange fashion trend, unless you've ever needed to smuggle a memory-erasing crystal past a group of mind gremlins. Quentin Tremblay may have woven an entire survival guide into the framework of his presidency, disguising it as absurdity to avoid being detected by those who watch from beyond. And this brings us to one of the eeriest questions of all. Was Quentin Tremblay meant to be forgotten? In a world filled with memory-wiping agents like the Society of the Blind Eye, what if Tremblay's legacy wasn't erased due to embarrassment, but as a calculated operation? Consider the possibility that Fort Pines wasn't the only person to attempt resistance against Bill Cipher. Tremblay may have been the prototype, the first anomaly to be scrubbed from the timeline. Gravity Falls has shown us again and again, memory is fragile. Histories can be rewritten. Identities can vanish. What if there are hundreds, thousands of would-be heroes who tried to stand up against the chaos, only to be wiped from the collective consciousness? Tremblay might have been the lucky one. He buried himself in the sugar armor before they could reach him. Echoes of Tremblay. The clues he left behind. There are dozens of scattered references to Tremblay's legacy hidden in Gravity Falls if you know where to look. Just a few examples. In the background of Journal 3, behind a tear-stained page about temporal rifts, is a crude drawing of Tremblay saluting with one arm and eating a turkey leg with the other. The caption reads, "The President Who Saw the Cracks." In Seuss's high school yearbook, a photo labeled History Club Honorary Member shows a blurred figure in a powdered wig photobombing the background. His face is scratched out, but the hat has the unmistakable initials, QT. On the town's founding charter, preserved under glass in City Hall, there's an invisible watermark revealed only under UV light shaped like an Ouroboros wrapped around a peanut brittle bar. The seal of the secret presidency? There's also the matter of his time coffin, a mythical object allegedly buried with Tremblay's second body, a decoy, some say, beneath the town's oldest tree. The time coffin is said to contain a watch that runs backward but always lands on the exact time of your greatest regret. A coin minted in 1776 with 13 sides, and the word evitar etched on it, Latin for to escape, and a note written in Tremblay's scrawl that says, "To those who read this, the storm is not over. The storm has never ended." Tremblay versus Cipher. A battle of chaos. At the end of the day, both Quentin Tremblay and Bill Cipher represent chaos, but from opposite ends of the spectrum. Bill's chaos is malicious, mind-bending, soul-devouring. It thrives on fear, distrust, and destruction. Tremblay's chaos is whimsical, unpredictable, but ultimately protective. It masks truth with laughter, hides pain beneath parody. This duality is important. Tremblay is what happens when a man touches the darkness, but chooses to fight it with joy, even if that joy appears foolish to others. It's why he resonates so deeply with fans of Gravity Falls. He isn't just comic relief, he's a mirror of what Gravity Falls is at its core. A place where mystery is wrapped in humor, where the most ridiculous clues are the most important, and where nonsense may be the only way to survive the truth. Tremblay may not have worn the cape of a superhero. He may not have wielded gadgets or spells or high-tech armor. But he did leave behind a legacy, one of laughter, survival, and cryptic warnings that are only now beginning to make sense. In a world where logic fails and time collapses in on itself, perhaps it takes a madman to be the last sane voice. Final words from Quentin Tremblay. In one of his few surviving audio recordings, recovered from a wax cylinder stored inside an armadillo statue, Tremblay's voice crackles through time, saying, "My fellow Americans and non-Americans, who are secretly lizard people in disguise, I salute you. If you're hearing this, then the brittle has broken, the peanuts have crumbled, and the truth is leaking out like a poorly corked soda bottle of destiny. I only ask that you do one thing. Don't forget to laugh, because the moment you stop laughing, he wins." That, in a nutshell, is Quentin Tremblay. A riddle, a relic, a joke that might be the most important warning of all. And in the winding, bizarre history of Gravity Falls, perhaps the most insane thing of all is how right he might have been. Though Dipper Pines was just a 12-year-old boy when he arrived in Gravity Falls, the secrets he uncovered, the choices he made, and the courage he showed painted the portrait of someone far older than his years. His bond with Journal 3 wasn't just academic curiosity, it was a lifeline. The journal helped Dipper confront the unknown, but it also began to change him. The summer days in Gravity Falls ticked by like the pages of a journal, each one stranger than the last. But behind every monster and mystery, there was always a greater question. What does it mean to know the truth? And perhaps even harder, what does it cost to pursue it? The moral cost of knowing. One of Dipper's defining traits was his relentless pursuit of the truth, often at any cost. He was logical, methodical, and often hyper-focused on the mystery at hand. But that pursuit sometimes put him at odds with others, especially his sister Mabel. Their bond was unshakable at its core, yet Dipper's focus on the journal and solving the town's anomalies would sometimes lead him to forget the very thing that grounded him, his twin. Mabel lived in the moment, painting rainbows and throwing glitter on life's problems. Dipper, meanwhile, dissected the universe with a magnifying glass, and when the rift between them grew, it was almost always because Dipper chose answers over empathy. Take, for instance, the time travel fiasco. In The Time Traveler's Pig, Dipper uses time travel to try and win Wendy's affection in a carnival ring toss game. But each loop causes a ripple, and eventually he learns that the only way to succeed means robbing Mabel of her beloved pet pig, Waddles. It's a gut-punch moment, logic versus love, data versus delight. Dipper realizes he can't have both. And for the first time, he chooses Mabel. It's a small but meaningful shift. Because in that choice, Dipper begins to realize that knowledge alone isn't power. Wisdom is. And wisdom often means giving something up. The Lonely Path of the Curious. Journal 3 was both Dipper's sword and shield. But it also made him feel isolated, even surrounded by his oddball summer family. Grunkle Stan, Seuss, Wendy, Mabel, he often felt like the only one who really saw the hidden patterns. It's the classic loneliness of the curious mind. When you start to see deeper truths, it can be hard to connect with those who don't. That loneliness came to a head in episodes like Double Dipper, where Dipper creates clones of himself in an attempt to master a party and win Wendy's attention. Instead of becoming more confident, he becomes fragmented, literally. The clones spiral out of control, mirroring his inner anxiety. And Dipper learns that trying to overplan life only leads to chaos. Or consider Dipper and Mabel versus the future, where he's offered the chance to become Ford's apprentice, to stay in Gravity Falls permanently, studying the paranormal full-time. For Dipper, it's a dream come true. But the cost is devastating. It means leaving Mabel behind. And for all the journal's knowledge, it doesn't offer advice for that kind of decision. Again, he's faced with a fundamental choice, not about monsters, but about meaning. And once more, he chooses love over lore. The fallibility of the journal. Perhaps one of the most compelling aspects of Dipper's journey is how he comes to realize that Journal 3, for all its answers, is incomplete. Worse, it can be wrong. The entries are brilliant but dated, written by Ford before he truly understood the implications of many of his own discoveries. This becomes painfully clear when Dipper tries to confront Bill Cipher using only the journal's advice. In sock opera, Dipper is so desperate to decode a message that he makes a deal with a voice in his mind, not realizing it's Bill in disguise. Bill tricks him, possesses his body, and nearly destroys everything Dipper holds dear. That was the turning point. Dipper began to understand that the journal was not a Bible. It was a lens, useful but limited. And in that realization, he grew. He started trusting his instincts more, leaning on the people around him and seeing himself not just as a student of the unknown, but a protector, becoming the author in spirit. The real author of the journal, Stanford Pines, was a genius, six-fingered, introverted, paranoid, and at times emotionally distant. When Dipper finally meets Ford, it's a bittersweet moment. Here's the man who wrote the journal, the one who left behind a breadcrumb trail through every mystery. Dipper idolizes him. But what he finds isn't just brilliance, it's the cost of obsession. Ford lived in fear. He burned bridges. He lost time, literal decades, to his quest for knowledge. And Dipper sees what he could become if he's not careful. But Ford also sees something in Dipper, something that maybe reminds him of himself before the obsession took over. And for a while he offers to train Dipper. It's the ultimate validation. Yet the irony is that Dipper's greatest growth comes not from becoming like Ford, but from realizing he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to live in isolation or paranoia. He doesn't want to lose Mabel. He doesn't want the truth if it costs him the people he loves. That decision, the refusal to become a copy of Ford, is Dipper's true authorship. He may not write in the journal's margins, but he changes its meaning. He turns it from a record of fear into a guidebook for courage. The Last Summer Night. In the final episode, Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, Dipper faces his greatest test. Bill Cipher has taken over reality, twisting Gravity Falls into a nightmare realm. Ford is captured. Mabel is trapped in a surreal dream bubble. The town is in ruins. And it's Dipper, not Ford, who leads the rescue. He navigates the chaos not with brute force or raw intelligence, but with empathy, creativity, and sheer determination. He rallies the town, unites the outcasts, and rescues his sister from a prison of false happiness. He doesn't do it alone, but it couldn't have happened without him. And in the final confrontation with Bill, it's not Dipper's knowledge that wins. It's Stan's sacrifice. It's family. After the dust settles, Dipper and Mabel prepare to leave Gravity Falls. The journal is packed away. The mysteries remain, but the chase is over, at least for now. And Dipper, he's still curious, still thoughtful, but wiser, stronger, whole. Even after the events of Weirdmageddon, something lingered in Dipper's heart, something quiet but unshakable. It wasn't fear, it wasn't regret, it was wonder. A burning ember of curiosity that hadn't gone out, even when the town returned to normal. Even after Journal 3 was packed away and tucked into his bag, the questions remained. Not about monsters, not about secrets, but about himself. Because somewhere between chasing gnomes and decoding ciphers, Dipper had started to become something else, someone else. A person who could stand on his own, even when the truth was complicated or painful. The journal had changed him, but it had never defined him. In the end, Dipper was more than just a boy with a guidebook. He was a guide in his own right. The legacy of curiosity. One of the last things Dipper did before leaving Gravity Falls was reread the final pages of Journal 3. Not to learn something new, but to remember how far he'd come. There were still gaps in the journal's knowledge, still entries that ended in half-finished thoughts or warnings without answers. But for the first time, Dipper didn't feel anxious about that. He had grown comfortable with not knowing everything. That was, perhaps, the greatest lesson Journal 3 could ever teach. Sometimes it's not about solving the mystery, it's about experiencing it. About walking through the woods with your sister by your side, wondering what that strange symbol on the tree means, and smiling because part of you doesn't want to know, because sometimes wonder is better than certainty. That shift in Dipper, from obsessive curiosity to balanced humility, was the final transformation. He wasn't just a questioner anymore. He was a protector, a big brother, a friend, a believer in magic, but not a prisoner of it. And though he may have left the shack behind, he carried the spirit of Gravity Falls with him. The hidden pages. But of course, Gravity Falls doesn't give up its mysteries so easily. One summer night, weeks after returning home, Dipper sat up in bed, unable to sleep. Something gnawed at him. So, by the faint light of a flashlight, he opened to Journal 3 one more time. And there it was. A page he had somehow missed. It wasn't like the others. It was newer. The ink was fresher. The paper was slightly different. It wasn't written by Ford, but by someone else. Someone who'd found the journal after Dipper had left it on a desk. Someone who had added their own thoughts. The handwriting was eerily familiar. It read, "To the next curious mind who holds this journal, you will never know everything, and that's okay. What matters is that you tried, you wondered, you believed. Keep asking questions. Keep protecting the ones who can't see what you see. The truth isn't out there. It's in you. MP." Dipper's breath caught. MP Mason Pines. His own initials. He had written it. He just didn't remember when. Maybe in a daze after the final battle. Maybe in a moment of quiet one summer afternoon. But it didn't matter. Because it was the perfect goodbye. Not just to the journal, but to a part of himself that had finally grown up. And somewhere in the distance, as if whispered on the wind, he swore he heard the soft flutter of owl wings and the rustle of unseen pages turning. Gravity Falls was still out there, and it always would be. In the heart of Gravity Falls, beneath the shifting forest shadows and veils of mystery, lies a story so profound that few even know how it began. Long before Dipper and Mabel stumbled into the chaos of gnomes and time travelers, before Bill Cipher even whispered his first lie, there was a boy born with 6 fingers and a mind that never stopped asking questions. His name was Stanford Philbrick Pines. The journals that defined an entire summer for Dipper, they were born not from legend, but from one man's desperation to understand the incomprehensible. From the quiet corners of his childhood to the cosmic terrors that nearly tore reality apart, Stanford Pines lived a life no textbook would dare to print. And yet, it's his writings, his observations, his warnings, that still echo through the dusty pages of Journal 1, 2, and 3. This is the story of how they came to be, and of the man who almost disappeared forever into the unknown. A boy with 6 fingers, born in Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey, Stanford Pines was not like the other children. While his twin brother Stanley was brawny, impulsive, and wild-hearted, Ford was reserved, methodical, and gifted with a brilliance that set him apart. And yet it wasn't his mind that caused whispers in the schoolyard. It was his hand. 6 fingers. A harmless anomaly, yes, but to the narrow minds of his classmates, it was cause for ridicule. They called him a freak, a monster, a mutant. And Ford, already burdened by a deep yearning to understand the world, retreated further into books and theories. Every time someone mocked him, he responded not with fists, but with facts, not with anger, but with invention. By the age of 10, Ford was building machines that could detect radio waves. By 13, he was sketching interdimensional theories, and by high school, he was inventing gadgets that left even his teachers speechless. But all the while, something pulled at him. A feeling. A shadow. Something was waiting for him out there in the unknown. Gravity Falls. A compass of curiosity. When Ford was accepted into Upsmore University, he thought his destiny was clear. Become a great scientist, publish his theories, and earn the respect he was so often denied. But fate, it seems, had other plans. After a cruel betrayal by his former friend Fiddleford McGucket and a sabotage science fair, Ford found his dream slipping away. His chances of getting into a top university evaporated, and with his options dwindling, he decided to follow the faintest trail, a whisper of strange occurrences, magnet anomalies, and urban legends that all seemed to point to one obscure spot on the map: Gravity Falls, Oregon. He packed his notes, his equipment, and a heavy heart, and left everything he knew behind. Ford believed that if he could just find what made Gravity Falls so strange, he could redeem his career, prove the doubters wrong, build a name beyond the jokes and sneers. But what he found was far more than he bargained for: the birth of Journal 1. Ford arrived in Gravity Falls during the quiet edge of autumn. The town seemed unassuming: wooden signs, oddball locals, cryptic totem poles. But beneath the rustic charm, he could feel it: an energy, a pull. He rented a small cabin deep in the forest and began his research. Day by day, he cataloged the oddities: glowing mushrooms that hummed at night, squirrels that whispered backwards, trees that bled black sap in the moonlight. And each discovery filled page after page of a battered notebook. That notebook would become Journal 1. It was never meant to be part of a trilogy. At first it was just observation, a log. But the deeper Ford dug, the stranger things became. He found tunnels hidden beneath the earth, clocks that ticked backwards, carvings in trees that matched no known language. At times it felt as though the forest itself was watching him. And then came the day he found the cave. A door to somewhere else. It started with a compass that spun wildly near the base of a ridge, then a strange hum beneath the rocks. Ford unearthed what he would later call the anomaly zone, a patch of land that defied explanation. Gravity reversed, light bent in unnatural ways, and in the center, a door, a portal, a shimmering rift unlike anything on Earth. Ford had stumbled onto something ancient, something powerful. And that's when the whispering began. Enter Bill Cipher. Ford thought he was alone in his pursuit, but reality had been watching him. Through the dreams, through the reflections, through the shadows, a triangular being began to appear. His name was Bill Cipher. He claimed to be a muse, a being of pure knowledge, an entity that had watched the rise and fall of galaxies. And he offered Stanford the one thing he craved most: understanding. Ford was skeptical at first, but Bill was charming, funny, insightful, and he seemed to know things Ford had never told Soul. He helped decode symbols, map anomalies, and draw connections that Ford would never have made alone. With Bill's help, Journal 1 grew exponentially. What had once been notes about tree gnomes and spectral sightings became detailed schematics, cryptograms, and theories about the multiverse. That's when Ford began Journal 2. He needed more room for bigger ideas. And slowly, without fully realizing it, he gave Bill access to his mind. As weeks blurred into months, the quiet cabin in the woods transformed into a laboratory of interdimensional speculation, with Bill Cipher whispering insights in the corners of Ford's consciousness. Journal 2 took on a darker, more complex tone. Ford was no longer just recording what he saw. He was designing experiments to bend space, testing rift theories, and imagining the machinery that might one day let him step beyond this reality. Bill provided blueprints, strange glowing diagrams that came to Ford in dreams or flashes during meditation. And Ford, in his obsessive thirst for knowledge, built them piece by piece. Among those diagrams was the first concept of the portal. To Ford, It was the ultimate scientific triumph, a window to other worlds, a chance to understand the greater cosmos. But to Bill Cipher, who never once lied but never told the whole truth, the portal was something else entirely. It was a keyhole, and Ford was the one turning the key. The construction took years. Ford funded it through secret grants, off-the-books patents, and salvaged tech from across the Northwest. He brought in help the brightest minds he could find, and among them was a man whose cheerful laugh and wild eyes hid an intellect to rival Ford's own. Fiddleford Hadron, Old Man McGucket. The Descent of McGucket. McGucket had been a college dropout and inventor, and a man who'd lost everything to his own brilliance. When Ford offered him a job under strict confidentiality, Fiddleford saw it as a second chance. He helped build the portal's interface, fine-tuned the dimensional frequency dampeners, and solved half a dozen paradox problems Ford couldn't crack alone. The man was eccentric, yes, obsessed with banjos and seabirds, but he was loyal. And when the portal neared completion, McGucket was the one who warned Ford. Something about the portal didn't feel right. The machine was humming before activation. Its core pulsed like a heartbeat. And during one test, McGucket caught a glimpse of something terrifying. It wasn't just a world of alien geometry or strange colors. He saw shapes that defied logic. Dreams filled with static and screaming. He began to suspect that Bill Cipher was not the benevolent muse he claimed to be. One night, Ford dreamt of Bill standing at the edge of the portal's event horizon, laughing as the sky cracked open behind him. When Ford awoke, he was drenched in sweat and surrounded by blueprints he didn't remember drawing. He locked the portal chamber. He sealed off the lab, and he began Journal 3. This time he didn't just record observations. He documented warnings, safeguards, pages and pages of defensive symbols, banishment rituals, and ways to stop Bill Cipher. He had finally realized what Bill was, a dream demon, a being of chaos who had tricked him into building a door into the physical world. Ford was furious with himself and terrified. He was one of the only humans alive who understood what Bill truly was and what he wanted. The journals became his final hope, a fragmented record, scattered across 3 volumes in case anything ever happened to him. Because Ford knew, if Bill succeeded in escaping the mindscape and entering physical reality, the universe itself might not survive. The rift. Ford's plan was to dismantle the portal and bury the pieces across the continent. But Bill had other ideas. One stormy night, as Ford prepared to destroy the final component, the portal activated on its own. It wasn't supposed to be possible. The security protocols were manual. The energy core was locked. But somehow, the machine roared to life. In the blue fire of the interdimensional rift, Ford glimpsed things no human mind was meant to comprehend. Mirror worlds, twisted doppelgangers, and a version of Gravity Falls where the sky was made of eyes and laughter never stopped. And from behind it all, Bill cackling, calling him author, saying, "You can't unbuild destiny." Ford shut the machine down manually, risking his life to collapse the energy field. He sealed the portal once more, this time for good. And then, knowing he was marked by Bill forever, he did the only thing he could to protect the world. He scattered the journals. Journal 1 hidden beneath the woods, sealed with encryptions. Journal 2 buried under the floorboards of his lab, rigged to a tripwire. And Journal 3, the final piece locked away in a tree trunk deep in the forest. He hoped no one would ever find them, and he disappeared into the portal. The more Stanford studied Bill Cipher, the more he realized that the being was older than time, smarter than any human, and far more dangerous than he had dared imagine. Cipher was not merely a trickster or demon. He was a force, an entity from a dimension where logic collapsed and madness ruled. A place where cause did not lead to effect, and symbols meant more than sentences. And somehow this thing had found a way into our world. But how? It began with dreams. Night after night, as Ford scoured his books, ran experiments, and explored the deepest corners of the forest, a voice began whispering in his sleep. Friendly at first, playful, like a game show host crossed with a carnival barker. The kind of voice you couldn't forget even if you tried. Bill. He offered knowledge, shortcuts, blueprints for machines no human mind could fully comprehend. And Ford, curious, brilliant, ambitious, was tempted. Who wouldn't be? After all, Cipher didn't ask for much. A little help, a few favors, access to his mind. "Let me in," the voice said, "and I'll show you the secrets of the multiverse." And Ford, desperate to understand the mysteries of Gravity Falls and unlock the full potential of the anomalies he'd encountered, let him in. That was the beginning of the end. Enter the nightmare realm. What Bill never revealed, at least not at first, was that he came from the nightmare realm, a place so distorted, so inherently alien, that the human mind could only grasp it through symbols, madness, and metaphor. Imagine a realm with no laws of physics, no consistency of form, no boundaries between thought and matter. That was where Bill had originated. A chaos being born of entropy and endless potential. He wasn't alone in his domain either. There were others. Unnamed entities, monstrous and vast, some hinted at in the deep corners of Journal 3. Creatures made of clocks and blood, others that devoured dimensions like meals. But Bill rose above them. He didn't just survive the chaos, he mastered it. And when he looked out across the boundary between his world and ours, he saw opportunity. A place with rules to break, minds to bend, a puzzle to corrupt. Earth. But entering our world wasn't so simple. Bill needed gateways, weak points in reality, and more importantly, he needed minds. Human minds to manipulate, to trick into building the tools he couldn't create himself. That's why Gravity Falls mattered so much. It wasn't just weird, it was wounded. A fracture point between dimensions. And Stanford Pines was the perfect pawn. The rift. Bill Cipher's master plan was never just to toy with a single town. No, what he wanted was a complete collapse of the dimensional barrier, a rupture in space-time that would let the nightmare realm bleed into reality. That's why he whispered the blueprints of the portal into Ford's dreams. Not because he wanted to help him, but because the portal itself was the key. It took years of construction. Ford became reclusive, obsessive. He abandoned his family, ignored warnings from the journals, and locked himself away in the basement of the Mystery Shack. Piece by piece, under Bill's guidance, he assembled the interdimensional gateway that would nearly bring about the end of everything. And just when the portal was nearly complete, Ford discovered the truth. Cipher wasn't his partner. He was using him. The portal wasn't a window, it was a door that, once opened, would let unspeakable horrors enter our world. The apocalypse disguised as a breakthrough. Ford tried to shut it down. He tried to destroy it. But by then it was too late. In one of the most fateful moments in the history of Gravity Falls, Ford was pulled into the portal, lost for 30 years in other dimensions. And Bill Cipher? He vanished. Waiting. Watching. Enter Dipper and Mabel. Fast forward 3 decades. A new pair of twins enters Gravity Falls, unknowingly stepping into the unfinished legacy of Stanford's mistakes. Bill, ever the opportunist, resurfaces. But this time he doesn't approach as a friend. He takes a more direct route, haunting dreams, warping reality, playing cruel pranks on the town. He enters people's minds. He possesses Dipper's body. He tempts and manipulates Gideon Gleeful, a boy driven by greed and inferiority, into becoming a vessel for his schemes. Bill's influence begins to spread like a virus through Gravity Falls. Only this time he's not hiding behind riddles and packs. He's preparing for invasion. And at the center of it all is a magical item known only as the Rift. When Ford eventually returns to our dimension, thanks to Dipper and Mabel's efforts to activate the portal and rescue him, he brings warnings, urgent and terrifying. The Rift is real. The fabric of space-time is already tearing, and Bill is inches from breaking through. The balance of reality hangs on the actions of children, a bitter genius, and a town that barely believes in its own strangeness. But even then, Bill plays his cards with elegance. He deceives, distracts, and destroys. He doesn't fight. He manipulates people into fighting themselves. Because Bill Cipher, above all, is a master of chaos. As summer in Gravity Falls drew to a close, the fragile cracks between dimensions began to widen. Bill Cipher had waited long enough. In a climactic betrayal, he tricked Mabel into giving up the vial containing the reality rift, disguised as a simple wish for an eternal summer. Mabel, caught in a moment of fear and uncertainty about growing up, agreed. And with that, the final piece fell into place. The rift shattered. Reality crumbled. And Weirdmageddon began. The skies turned red. The laws of physics unraveled. Eyeballs with bat wings swooped through the air, pyramids danced, and people were transformed into inanimate objects or surreal distortions of themselves. The very fabric of the world twisted into an impossible nightmare playground where Bill reigned supreme. It was everything he had wanted. He built a massive throne atop the remains of the pyramid, turning the town of Gravity Falls into his own personal carnival of suffering. The few who resisted were turned into stone or warped into monsters. The weirdness bubbles, scattered across the landscape, created isolated realms of looping madness. There was no safety, no rules, just chaos. But Bill made one fatal mistake. He couldn't leave Gravity Falls. The same cosmic weirdness magnet that made the town perfect for his infiltration also trapped him. Something about the geography, the ancient symbols surrounding the town's perimeter, the natural magical defenses, whatever the reason, Bill needed one more thing to finish his conquest: access to the minds of the Pines family. The final stand. To escape Gravity Falls and unleash Weirdmageddon on the rest of the world, Bill needed access to Ford's mind, the only one who knew how to dismantle the final magical barriers. So he captured him, bound him to a throne of stone in the pyramid, tortured him, mocked him, and demanded entry into his mind. But Stanford resisted. That resistance gave the rest of the Pines family, Dipper, Mabel, Grunkle Stan, Wendy, Seuss, enough time to regroup. The final battle was no longer about fists or weapons. It was about willpower, family, and sacrifice. Together, they constructed the Zodiac Wheel, a mystical symbol hinted at in Journal 3. 12 symbols representing 12 people. A circle of unity that could supposedly destroy Bill Cipher if activated by a perfectly bonded team. But Bill was too clever. He manipulated Stan and Ford into arguing at the critical moment, breaking the circle's harmony. The ritual failed. The wheel crumbled. Bill won. Or so he thought. Sacrifice. Just when it seemed like there was no hope left, Dipper and Mabel made one final plan. They realized something crucial. Bill could only access Ford's mind, not Grunk Stan's. So they devised a switch. Stanford would pretend to surrender his mind to Bill. But at the last second, he and Stan would swap places. And Bill, unaware of the switch, would enter the mind of Stan. A mind that was about to be erased. Once Bill entered, Ford activated a memory-erasing gun and wiped Stan's mind clean, destroying both Bill Cipher and all of Stan's memories in one stroke. It worked. Bill was trapped inside a collapsing consciousness. In his final moment, he screamed in rage, his form glitching and warping into nothingness. He reached out, cracked, and broke into scattered triangles of glowing yellow light. And then silence. Weirdmageddon ended. Reality stabilized. The skies returned to blue. People turned back to normal. Gravity Falls was saved. But at a terrible cost. Grunkle Stan, kind, greedy, brave, deeply flawed, was gone. He couldn't remember Dipper. He didn't know Mabel. His memories were dust. And then, in one of the most emotional moments of the entire series, something miraculous happened. Bit by bit, memory by memory, Stan's identity began to return. Through photos, stories, hugs, laughter, and love, the family helped restore him. Bill Cipher was gone. But the bond between the Pines family proved stronger than even interdimensional nightmares. What was Bill really? Even after his apparent destruction, questions about Bill Cipher linger. Was he truly gone? Is it possible a fragment of him still exists, buried in some corner of the mindscape, waiting for another opportunity? And most hauntingly, was Bill Cipher created by the universe's chaos? Or did chaos invent the universe for beings like him? His cryptic final words, scrambled backwards and still echo among Gravity Falls fans. AXOLOTL. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. A spell, a plea, a prophecy? No one knows for sure. But one thing is certain. Bill Cipher's influence didn't die with him. It continues to linger in the margins of Gravity Falls, in flickering symbols, broken statues, half-remembered dreams, and the way shadows seem to move just slightly when you're not looking. He is chaos. He is trickery. He is possibility. And he might just come back. To truly understand the man Stanford Philbrick Pines became, we must take a slow walk through the layers of his pain, genius, and fear. While many characters in Gravity Falls found themselves changed by the mysteries of the town, Ford's entire identity was shaped by the unknown. He didn't merely observe the supernatural, he invited it in. But with that invitation came a burden that few could carry. Ford was different from the beginning, not just because of his 6 fingers, but because of how deeply he felt the world. While his twin Stanley chased street smarts and adventure, Ford buried himself in scientific journals and fantasies about discovery. What others saw as odd, he saw as potential. It's no surprise that when he learned about the mysterious town of Gravity Falls, he became obsessed with understanding it. But his pursuit wasn't just about curiosity, it was about proving himself. A rift between brothers. Before the journal entries, before the portal, before Bill Cipher whispered through his dreams, there was a heartbreak far more personal. The betrayal between brothers. When Ford was accepted into West Coast Tech and prepared to present his grand magnetic anomaly thesis, centered on the strange readings he'd gathered near Gravity Falls, he believed his life was finally taking shape. But Stanley, in a misguided attempt to help, accidentally sabotaged Ford's future. What followed wasn't just a break in trust. It was a permanent shattering of the foundation Ford had built his identity on. He didn't just lose a scholarship. He lost faith in his only brother. That rupture would echo through time. Ford turned inward, isolating himself from Stanley, family, and the normal world. Years passed. Friendships faded. But one thing remained, his fascination with Gravity Falls. He packed his life into a van and drove to the strange town that had haunted his mind for years. There he purchased a small home, turned it into a secret laboratory, and began building what would become Journal 1, the first record of the anomalies he witnessed. Ford's entries in the journals began almost innocently. Documentation of strange species, fluctuating magnetic fields, and odd atmospheric readings. But soon his discoveries grew darker. Creatures with the ability to erase memories, time anomalies, entities that could possess thoughts. And then, the dream started. The voice in the shadows. At first it came in fragments, shapes in his peripheral vision, whispers in the night, patterns and numbers. But then Bill Cipher made himself known. Ford, in his eagerness, didn't see the danger. Bill presented himself as a friend from another dimension, a being of infinite knowledge. Ford, desperate for answers and still reeling from his failed academic career, trusted him. Together they began building something that could reach beyond the boundaries of space and time, a dimensional gateway. Ford's logic was simple. If the anomalies of Gravity Falls were bleeding in from other universes, perhaps he could peer into those realities. Perhaps he could learn what no human had ever known. But as the portal neared completion, things changed. He grew paranoid, sleep-deprived, violent. Bill's influence had wormed its way into Ford's subconscious. Symbols danced behind his eyes. He began scrawling sigils he didn't understand. He locked himself inside the bunker, hiding from something. The journal entries became erratic. In Journal 2, he warns, trust no one. In Journal 3, the language turns desperate. Bill is not what he seems. The truth had dawned on him too late. Bill Cipher wasn't offering knowledge. He was extracting it. Ford had unknowingly granted a malevolent dream demon access to his mind, his blueprints, his portal. And worse, he had given Bill the possibility of entering the physical realm. Realizing the horror he had unleashed, Ford did the only thing he could. He disappeared. Into the abyss. Ford set his plan in motion. He recorded final warnings. He split the journals into 3 volumes and scattered them. He encoded fail-safes, built countermeasures, created a vast electromagnetic shielding system around the town to keep the anomalies contained. And then, with the final surge of the machine, he stepped into the portal. But where did he go? The answer is, nowhere we can fully comprehend. Ford spent 30 years trapped in dimensions beyond human logic. Places where physics bent like paper, where beings lived outside of time. He encountered civilizations of sentient math, fought off armies made of crystal, was hunted by memory eaters. In one dimension, he was briefly considered a god. In another, a parasite. Every time he escaped one world, he found himself in another, more bizarre. It wasn't just his body that endured, it was his mind. Ford had always prided himself on logic, but now he had to survive using instinct, improvisation, and luck. He missed his family, and missed his life, and he cursed his arrogance. But he also never stopped learning. Throughout it all, he continued documenting, adapting, theorizing. He began to understand how Gravity Falls might act as a crossroads, a place where interdimensional threads tangled. He realized Bill Cipher was not just a dream demon, but a gatekeeper, a being bent on tearing apart the wall between realities. Ford's mission evolved. Stop Bill, no matter the cost. Return to reality. When Stanley, in a moment of extraordinary bravery and loyalty, reactivated the portal to rescue his brother, Ford emerged from the other side, grizzled, exhausted, and furious. The moment should have been triumphant, but instead it was laced with bitterness. 30 years of pain didn't evaporate with a hug. Ford returned not as a brother, but as a man obsessed with preventing catastrophe. He rejected Stanley's affection, pushed away Dipper and Mabel, reclaimed his journals, and went back into the lab. Because he knew something no one else did. The barrier between worlds was thin, and Bill Cipher was still out there, waiting. Ford didn't just return from other dimensions. With fear, he returned with knowledge. He understood how Bill worked now. Bill didn't attack head-on. He infiltrated, manipulated. He made you think you had the power when in truth, you were a pawn on his board. Ford reinforced the town's magnetic shielding, installed fail-safe devices, sealed off vulnerable spots in the forest. But the most powerful defense? Knowledge. He began slowly confiding in Dipper, recognizing a kindred spirit in the boy. Dipper, with Journal 3 in hand, had already proven himself resourceful and sharp. He reminded Ford of himself, but younger, more hopeful, less damaged. But hope, as Ford knew, could be dangerous. Because no matter how many traps Ford laid, how many contingency plans he prepared, he couldn't stop everything. And when the moment came when Bill finally found a vessel to possess, when he manipulated events to shatter the barrier between dimensions, all hell broke loose. Weirdmageddon had begun. Ford was captured almost immediately, a cruel irony considering how tirelessly he had worked to prevent the very disaster now unfolding. Bill Cipher paraded him through the shattered remnants of Gravity Falls like a prize, and then he did something worse. He invaded Ford's mind. Bill's goal was simple. Extract the formula to destroy the dimensional barrier once and for all. If he could unravel the fabric of reality, he wouldn't be confined to dreams or secret pacts. He'd become a god in every plane. Ford had the equation. Bill needed it. But even broken, even bruised, Ford resisted. His mindscape was a fortress. Memories locked in safe rooms, emotions protected by logic and cold calculation. Bill thought he could break him in minutes. It took days, and even then, Ford never gave in. But it wouldn't be Ford who turned the tide. The redemption of a brother. In a stunning twist of fate, it was Stanley, the very brother Ford had written off, insulted, disowned, who saved him. Donning his brother's coat, and willingly allowing himself to be mind-scanned by Bill, Stan tricked the demon into entering his mind instead. And in one of the most emotional moments in Gravity Falls history, the brothers made a devastating choice: to erase Stan's memories in order to destroy Bill forever. It worked. Bill Cipher was annihilated. Stan, for a time, forgot everything, including Mabel, Dipper, and Ford himself. But as we know, love has a funny way of sticking. Mabel's scrapbook helped him recover, and in that moment, Ford finally understood something he'd missed his entire life: that love was stronger than intellect, that loyalty could outmatch logic. He had chased the stars, bent reality, and faced horrors that would drive most men insane. But the true miracle of Gravity Falls wasn't in the anomalies. It was in the people. A new mission. After Bill's destruction and the repair of Gravity Falls, Ford had a choice: stay in the shack, continue experimenting, remain paranoid. Instead, he chose something unexpected. He forgave Stanley. Together, the twins set sail on a grand new adventure, mapping the uncharted anomalies of the world. No longer burdened by rivalry or pain, Ford embraced his brother not as a nuisance or failure, but as his equal, it was healing. And yet Ford never let go of his mission. The journals were locked away, but not destroyed. His research continued, only now it was tempered with wisdom, patience, and heart. The Ford Pines who sailed off into the sunset was not the same man who had vanished into the portal 30 years before. He had grown. He had suffered. And he had come home. Reflection. The price of knowledge. Ford's story is a cautionary tale. It teaches us that obsession, even in the name of discovery, can blind us. That brilliance, unchecked by compassion, can become a cage. And that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not those hidden in the stars, but those found in the heart of a sibling or the laughter of a child. Gravity Falls was never just about monsters and codes. It was about healing. Ford Pines thought he had to save the world alone. But in the end, it was love, trust, and family that truly did. It began with a crack, a ripple in reality that sounded not like thunder, but like laughter, strange, high-pitched, and impossible to locate. Birds flew backward. Trees bled bright blue sap. Time stopped, then stuttered, and then reversed for 4.3 seconds. In the sky above Gravity Falls, a tear opened, and through that tear came chaos. Weirdmageddon had arrived. Bill Cipher, the triangle-shaped, top-hat-wearing dream demon, had spent eons locked within the mindscape, confined to the strange realm between sleep and sanity. But now he was free, and not just to wander to rule. With the interdimensional rift shattered and the barrier around Gravity Falls undone, Bill unleashed the full force of his mind-breaking reality onto the town. And the world turned inside out. A town rewritten. The sky above Gravity Falls was no longer blue. It was a kaleidoscope, shifting shapes, bleeding colors, melting constellations. Bill's citadel floated above the town like a monstrous throne, part eye, part skeleton, part dream. Roads curled into loops. Houses pulsed like living things. Statues wept. Clocks melted. Fish swam through the air. And the townsfolk? Most didn't get a chance to scream. They were turned to stone, trapped in bubbles, reshaped into nightmares of themselves. The entire town was frozen in a single moment, Bill's playground. Only a few escaped his touch. Wendy, Suze, Gideon reluctantly, Pacifica, and a few surviving townsfolk. And at the heart of it all were Dipper and Mabel. But they were separated. Because even before Weirdmageddon began, the wedge between the twins had been growing. The rift and the rift between them. It's important to understand that Weirdmageddon didn't begin with monsters or magic. It began with doubt. When Ford revealed the dimensional rift, the dangerous tear in space-time created by Bill's influence, he told Dipper to keep it secret, to be responsible, to grow up. Dipper, eager to be taken seriously, agreed. But that secrecy created distance between him and Mabel. She didn't understand why her brother was so tense, why he was hiding things. And then came the Mabelan deception, Bill's trap. He tricked Mabel into sealing the rift herself by offering her a dream world where summer never ended, where Dipper never grew up, and where everything stayed perfect. In a moment of vulnerability, Mabel accepted not out of greed or malice, but out of fear, and the barrier collapsed. Weirdmageddon was born. Dipper in the apocalypse. When the world fell apart, Dipper didn't run. He adapted. He found allies. Wendy, with her calm under pressure. Seuss, with his unwavering loyalty. Together they navigated the distorted landscape, dodging eye bats, reality shifters, and creatures that couldn't be named. They made maps out of instinct, schedules out of starlight, hope out of habit. But Dipper's goal was clear: find Mabel, and he knew where she was. Bill had hidden her in a bubble, a dreamscape constructed from her memories and desires, a perfect world where nothing bad could happen. Mabeland. To save her, Dipper had to go inside. Mabeland. The trap of comfort. Inside the bubble, Dipper wasn't Dipper. He was smiling, happy, carefree. No worries, no mysteries. Just endless summer, snacks, and dance parties. Mabel ruled this place like a queen, bright, loving, and completely unaware that it wasn't real. Something inside Dipper resisted, because he knew. He remembered the truth. And eventually, so did she. The confrontation between them wasn't explosive. It was quiet, painful, honest. Dipper admitted he didn't want to grow up alone. Mabel admitted she didn't want him to leave her behind. They cried, they hugged. They chose reality, even if it was broken. And the bubble popped. The twins were back together. A resistance is formed. With Mabel free, the twins, Wendy, Suze, and their allies regrouped in the woods. They found the mystery shack now outside Bill's reach, thanks to its erratic construction and mystical defenses, and turned it into a fortress. The resistance was born. Pacifica joined them, leaving behind her pampered past. Gideon, once Bill's pawn, switched sides. Even old man McGucket, long dismissed as a lunatic, played a vital role building machines to fight back. Ford, rescued from Bill's grip, brought knowledge. Stan, still confused, brought chaos and eventually sacrifice. The final stand. With the shack transformed into a giant mech, powered by the last sparks of science and hope, the team launched a final assault on Bill's pyramid. What followed was a surreal battle, lasers against illusions, fists against fear. But Bill was still winning. In the end, only one strategy could defeat him: erasing the mind he inhabited. Stan volunteered. The memory gun, a device first used to wipe McGucket's memories, was used again. This time on Stan himself, with Bill inside his mind. And as the erasure began, Bill screamed. His body warped. His laugh cracked. And then, silence. Gone. Goodbye to the mystery. Gravity Falls healed. The sky turned blue again. The people unfroze. The buildings reassembled. Summer came to its quiet, natural end. Ford and Stan, now truly brothers again, set off on a sailing trip around the globe, not to escape, but to explore together. Mabel and Dipper prepared to return home. But they didn't leave the same way they arrived. They had seen the edge of reality. They had defeated a god. They had grown not apart, but together. Reflection. The end and the beginning. Weirdmageddon was the collapse of everything that made sense. A town turned into a dream. A dream turned into a nightmare. But it wasn't just chaos. It was a mirror. It forced every character to confront who they really were. Dipper faced responsibility. Mabel faced change. Ford faced his past. Stan faced his heart. And through that confrontation, they grew. The end of Gravity Falls wasn't a disaster. It was a transformation. A necessary breaking so something stronger could rise. The sacrifice of a con man. When the decision was made that Bill Cipher would be lured into someone's mind and destroyed using the memory eraser, only one person was brave and reckless enough to do it: Grunkle Stan. And it made sense in a heartbreaking way. Stan had always seen himself as the lesser twin, the screw-up, the burden, the disappointment. Stanford was the genius, the explorer, the hero. Stan was just the one who ran a tourist trap and lied for a living. But what Stan did that day was no con. It was truth, the deepest truth of all. that love meant sacrifice. With Bill tricked into entering Stan's mind, Ford activated the gun. There was no turning back. The erasure began. Inside Stan's mind, Bill screamed. He writhed, tried to twist the rules, shift the logic, flee. But he was inside a collapsing house, the memories burning down like paper in a firestorm. And in the final moment just before oblivion, Bill Cipher let out a distorted scream, a string of ancient symbols, and vanished. Destroyed. But so was Stan. A moment without memory. In the silence that followed, Stan sat motionless, his eyes empty, his voice gone. He didn't recognize anyone, not Ford, not the kids, not even himself. His mind was blank. The man who had saved them all was gone. And the mystery shack, the summer adventures, the bickering, the jokes, the bedtime stories, all of it meant nothing to him now. Mabel cried. Dipper stood frozen. Even Sue's, always the emotional glue, didn't know what to say. But then something small, almost insignificant, happened. Waddles, Mabel's pet pig, trotted over to Stan, snorted once, and nuzzled his foot. Stan blinked and laughed. Just a little. A spark. A flicker. The tiniest memory pushing its way back through the fog. And slowly, over the next few days, with love, patience, and a lot of Mabel's crafts and cookies, Stan's memories returned. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to say he remembered the kids. Enough to say he remembered the summer. And that was enough for everyone. Gravity Falls heals. Weirdmageddon was over, but the scars it left would never truly vanish. Some buildings would always lean the wrong way. Some shadows would always flicker even when there was no light. Some of the townsfolk would whisper about dreams they had, while frozen dreams of triangles and endless laughter and burning skies. But they survived. Pacifica began spending more time at the shack, ditching her old snobby persona in favor of a girl who'd seen real fear and chosen to fight it. Gideon, who had once worked with Bill, stuck around now reformed, humble, and awkwardly trying to make amends, especially to Mabel, who mostly just rolled her eyes. And Suze? Suze was given the keys to the mystery shack. Grunkle Stan officially passed the torch. It made sense no one knew the shack like Suze. No one loved it more. He became the new manager, the heart and humor of the place. And even with Bill gone, the weirdness never truly left. Business was booming. Ford and Stan, brothers once more. For Ford and Stan, Weirdmageddon was the ultimate wake-up call. They had spent decades locked in resentment and misunderstanding, one locked in another dimension, the other locked in his own bitterness. But when the dust settled, they realized something they hadn't said aloud in years. They were brothers. Not perfect, not without flaws, but family. Together they made a plan, not to rebuild the portal or chase cosmic knowledge, but to travel, to explore the strange corners of the world, together as adventurers, as siblings. They left Gravity Falls in an old boat, a pair of cranky old men with a lifetime of stories behind them, and a future finally free of regret. The end of summer. As for Dipper and Mabel, the summer was ending. The bus back home had been waiting dusty, half-forgotten, and slightly surreal. It felt like something from a dream. After all, they'd seen dreamscapes, monsters, gods, alternate dimensions, the idea of going home, of returning to school and chores, and normal felt distant. But they had changed. Dipper wasn't the same awkward, anxious boy who had arrived with a suitcase full of questions. And Mabel wasn't the same carefree girl with a suitcase full of glitter. They had seen truth. They had fought. They had won. As they boarded the bus, the town of Gravity Falls shimmered in the morning light. The mystery shack stood crooked in the distance. Waddles squealed in Mabel's arms. Stan saluted. Ford gave a small nod. Suze cried loudly. The bus pulled away. And as they drove into the ordinary world, Dipper clutched Journal 3 one last time, before leaving it with Stan. Because some secrets were meant to stay where they belonged, in the hands of those who would protect them. And Bill? You might be wondering, what became of Bill Cipher? The answer is complicated. The mindscape doesn't play by the rules of life and death. And though Bill was erased from Stan's mind, some believe echoes of him remain in dreams, in symbols, in the glitchy static between radio stations. And if you look closely enough, you might see a yellow triangle in the corner of your vision. You might hear laughter where there should be silence. Because in Gravity Falls, nothing is ever truly gone. As the dust settled after a weird Mageddon, Gravity Falls returned to its familiar rhythm, or at least something close to it. But for those who had lived through the chaos, things were never quite the same. The town wore the scars of what had occurred, not physically, for much of the damage had mysteriously vanished, but spiritually. The townspeople had vague memories, like remnants of a fever dream. They couldn't place the details, couldn't name the triangle that haunted them, but the fear lingered like the residue of smoke after a wildfire. Mabel Pines, ever the optimist, tried to bring joy back to the world around her. In the weeks following Bill's defeat, she organized celebrations, art contests, rebuild and bedazzle days, and even a community hug-a-thon. Her scrapbook swelled with photos, a juxtaposition of smiles and eyes that seemed to carry more depth than before. Even she, the heart of the Pines family, bore subtle changes. She held on tighter to her brother, smiled a little longer when someone made her laugh, and paused just a second longer before making a wish. Dipper, on the other hand, became more introspective. He returned to Journal 3, though now he knew its creator and added entries of his own. He wasn't just reading the mysteries of others anymore. He was writing his own. He started cataloging not just the creatures and phenomena of Gravity Falls, but also his personal thoughts, feelings, and questions. He wrote about what it meant to face your fear, to lose faith in someone you trusted, to risk the end of the world for the people you loved. In that way, Journal 3 evolved into something new, a living record of Dipper's journey from boy to hero. Grunkle Stan, perhaps, changed the most. After Ford restored his mind through shared memories, something inside him softened. For the first time in years, he had more than just his tricks and money-making schemes. He had connection. He and Ford, once separated by pride and pain, began traveling together, fulfilling their boyhood dreams of exploring the unexplained. They sailed strange waters, studied forgotten civilizations, and charted unknown dimensions. But perhaps more importantly, they laughed again. Stan still wore his gruff exterior like armor, but underneath something had healed. Back in Gravity Falls, Seuss became the new caretaker of the Mystery Shack. No longer just the lovable handyman, he was now the face of the business. He took to the role with pride, turning the shack into an even weirder, wilder, and more welcoming place. He didn't just keep the old gimmicks, he made them better. He created exhibits inspired by real supernatural encounters, unaware that sometimes the exhibits were real. But that was Gravity Falls, a place where truth and fiction danced so closely, they were almost the same thing. Wendy returned to her life with a sense of grounded calm. Though she rarely spoke about the things she had seen, The fear, the fight, the fall of a cosmic being, something about her demeanor changed. She was still chill, still cool, still ready to throw an axe if needed, but there was a deeper resolve in her now. She had seen her world nearly collapse, and she'd fought back, and that gave her a quiet confidence that words couldn't touch. Gideon Gleeful, once a self-proclaimed psychic and later a pawn of Bill Cipher, found himself in a strange position after Weirdmageddon. Freed from his cell, his powers, and his delusions of grandeur, he tried clumsily to reinvent himself. Though no one quite trusted him, and though his southern charm couldn't erase all the damage he'd caused, he did begin to change, slowly. He helped rebuild parts of the town, donated money, sent anonymous letters of apology. He was still Gideon, of course, dramatic and flashy, but his ambitions had shifted. Instead of control, maybe now he just wanted acceptance. And then there was Ford. Stanford Pines had spent 30 years trapped between worlds, chasing knowledge, haunted by betrayal, obsessed with solving mysteries too big for one man. After Bill's defeat and his brother's sacrifice, a sacrifice that briefly erased Stan's entire self, Ford found himself shaken. He had dedicated his life to preventing catastrophe, only to find that love, not intellect, had saved the world. This humbled him. He began to view science and mystery through a new lens, not as tools for control, but as windows into deeper understanding. The multiverse was still out there, of course. Strange anomalies still popped up in places with weak dimensional walls. But Ford no longer saw himself as the lone guardian. He had his brother now, and he had family. They'd spend months away on research expeditions, only to return to Gravity Falls with stories, specimens, and hugs that lasted too long. But what of Bill Cipher? Defeated, banished to the mindscape, possibly shattered and fragmented, Bill was gone, but not forgotten. Dipper, especially, remained cautious. He often wondered if remnants of Bill still lingered, like malware embedded in a cosmic system. He kept a keen eye out for triangular shapes, cryptic whispers, flickers in the static of a screen, just in case. And he wasn't wrong to be cautious. Because Bill's influence didn't end with Weirdmageddon. Strange phenomena continued to happen. Items in the shack would move slightly when no one was looking. Radios would pick up broadcasts in languages that didn't exist. A few townsfolk, Old Man McGucket included, would occasionally have dreams they swore weren't theirs. One day, Dipper found a torn page in the back of Journal 3. It wasn't written in Ford's handwriting, nor was it his own. The symbols were familiar, twisted, chaotic, laughing at logic. And at the bottom of the page, in faint golden ink, were 3 words: "I'm still watching." It wasn't proof of anything, but in Gravity Falls, the absence of proof was often the strongest proof of all. Dipper didn't panic. He just closed the journal, locked it in the old safe under the shack, and wrote his own entry. Even when you think it's over, stay curious, because that's what Gravity Falls had taught him. The town, despite its bizarre nature, was never about just the mysteries. It was about how people responded to them. The bravery of asking questions, the courage to face the unknown, the strength of choosing love, even when fear is louder. The summer eventually came to an end. The last day was quiet. Dipper and Mabel packed their things, said their goodbyes, and stood for a moment in front of the mystery shack. It looked the same, but they knew better. Every board, every creak in the floor, every crooked sign had become a part of them. They promised they'd come back next summer. But even if they didn't, even if life pulled them in different directions, Gravity Falls would always be with them. Because some places never let you go. And as the bus pulled away, winding down that forest road, a single pine tree swayed gently in the breeze. If you looked closely, very closely, you might have seen a golden eye just for a second blink and vanish.